So what we're going to do, the first method we're going to implement is the save method, and that's going to use the storage to make sure that whatever we have in this variable here, which is our inquiries array, is saved to our storage. And it's really easy. This dot storage dot set, and what we're going to set. We're going to set up what it's called, and that's going to be inquiries. And we're going to say, okay, what do we want to save? This dot inquiries. So whatever in our current array, when we call this save method, it'll be added to the storage underneath an identifier that we can use called inquiries. In local storage, what you've got to be really careful about when you use ionic storage is that you don't have identical names, because that would cause the application to get really confused, and you, about what's actually being stored, so that when you recall it, you know what you're going to get. So that's the save method. So the next thing we're going to try and do is implement the load method, and this is the most complex method within this whole application. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get from storage whatever is currently the state of our stored data. And we want then to put it into what you see on line 10, which is the inquiries array. So we're going to assign to the inquiries array whatever is held in storage. Now what we need to do is we need to do this in a particular way that makes it a more efficient use of the processes. So we put this dot storage dot get. What are we going to get? We're going to get the to-dos, the inquiries. And we want to say that this has to be what we call an asynchronous operation. It's worth just thinking about that for a second. What's an asynchronous operation? This data that we're holding here might be coming from a database which is remotely connected to this application. So that means that that can take some time to connect and retrieve the data that needs to be returned. So we say we use what's called an asynchronous method, and we're going to use the then, because that means that the whole of the application can continue to run while this operation is happening. It doesn't slow everything down. And it's got a particular type of format. We'll just put a semicolon there. And that means that this can carry on with its process and it doesn't stop the whole of the application being run. And what we want to do there is we want to actually say we want to deal with the situation where there are no inquiries to retrieve. So if inquiries not the exclamation, as we call it, the bang, equals null, we then say this dot inquiries equals inquiries, which is what we're getting back from the storage. And I'm getting a red line here because I've forgotten to say what you're going to return, so it's going to be inquiries. I think it might be better if we'd maybe said in our storage, but I'm not going to go back, stored inquiries versus inquiries, so that you could clearly see what we're getting. But that's got rid of my error. So that's the first stage of getting the data back. But it's not quite good enough yet, and it may cause us issues with it, especially if we're dealing with the remote database storage. So we'll fix that next. So we need the storage systems to tell us when they're done. And what we'll do is we'll do that by using what's called a promise. Now, a promise is a way of making sure that we get an indication of when something has been completed. And because this is an async, this can't just be at any set time. We can't rely on it being fast or slow or quick or anything. So we need a notifier. So we're going to use what's called a promise. So return new, and this is a recognized word, promise, and that's the word that we do. So what are we going to get from that? We're going to get a thing that is resolved. So we do resolve, Yeah, go the other side of that. And that will tell us when whatever is inside here has been completed. So what? We need to take this out of here and move it in there. So this will say that whenever the whole of this is done, we will get back whatever has been done inside the promise. So we want to know when this has been resolved. So we indicate once that has stopped executing, resolve true. So as I said, this is quite a complicated bit of code, and what we're doing is we're doing an asynchronous operation, time dependent. We don't know when exactly it will be finished, and we're going to wrap it up inside a promise, and the promise will tell us when it has been finished. And if you're not sure about promises, there's a lot of stuff on Tinderwebs about how they work, beyond the scope of what you have to understand, but you may be interested and you may want to investigate it further. So the next method that we'll implement is the get, and remember we want to get a particular inquiry based on its ID. And so what we use is something that's offered within the storage Ionic storage system, and it uses a thing called find, not unnatural. I'm sure you understand what that means. So I'm just pasting the code in because it makes it easier. So I'm going to say return this dot inquiries, whatever's stored in our array, find the inquiry where returning the inquiry ID equals the current state of ID that we've passed into the function. Please ignore the little red line for the minute. Perfectly happy with double equals. See what it's saying? It should be triple equals, so but that ties it down to being precisely the same. So we won't do that in this case. So for the add inquiry method, what we want to do is we want to push onto the array using the push method, and it says this dot inquiries push the current inquiry, and then we'll just do this dot save, and that saves the state of the inquiries array straight into the new structure that we've just added a new service to, a new inquiry. So because we've got an import of the inquiry from our interfaces, this is a good place where we could put a strong type onto this that's been passed in. So we're going to say that has to be of type inquiry. That means that it's rigorously controlled in structure and that we have absolute clarity about what's going to be stored on this array when we add it. So that's our EnquiryService methods complete, and we'll move on from there and start to implement the other features.